Good morning, my dear friends. The time has come to finally show you how I prepared a new flower bed in my garden. Listen, just a moment ago there was a lawn here in this spot. I decided to reduce the size of this lawn in favor of a flower bed like this. Flower beds in the sun with plants that can withstand such intense sunlight during the day and that don't need that much water. Of course, these are plants that need to be watered, but they require less water, so they'll do great in a sunny flower bed like this. Actually, everything is already prepared, so I can tell you step by step how I did it and what else I'm going to do right now. My dear friends, before I tell you step by step how I made this flower bed, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel because then you'll be able to follow how this flower bed develops. You will get notifications that there is a new video. I will try to give updates on this flower bed at least 3 or 4 times a year, and you'll be able to see whether the plants have worked out, what else I have planted, or if I had to remove something. And all those things related to how it grows and how a sunny flower bed develops. Listen, with such transformations, consistency is very important because if you remove the turf, you have to choose 2 paths. Either you do everything right after removing the turf, or like in my case, because I removed the turf a bit differently through verticutting. I didn't want to take out the soil, I just gently loosened the whole lawn with a verticutter, and then I loosened it even more gently. So for me, this process took longer because I was observing what would come up here, whether any weeds would appear, and I removed them regularly. So there are 2 ways. Either you do everything right away, or you wait and observe without any plants. No, you can't plant half the plants and then wait 2 or 3 months to add more and more. Because then in fact those weeds will start coming up and it'll be harder to remove them. And it would also be good to cover that soil, for example, with some wood chips or compost. The plants I've planned for here need to be planted as soon as possible so they can develop their root systems. And since the change in the garden is significant because a large part of the garden will be changed, the expenses are also considerable. Because to create this flower bed I had to buy edging, almost 700 kilograms of stone to spread on the path, landscape fabric, stones for steps so that you can move around the flower bed. And of course a lot of plants as well as soil or compost. However, instead of burdening the household budget with such a large expense, I approached this quite strategically. I ordered all the products on Allegro and chose Allegro Pay as the payment method. I want to show you what kind of household budget management options these types of payments offer. That's why I also invited Allegro to the Wow Garden project, and thanks to having such partners in the Wow Garden project, we can travel to gardens and show you these beautiful spaces, and at the same time talk about what our partners have to offer you. First of all, my dear friends, when I started working on this flower bed, I obviously removed the turf. Then I marked out the main path where I covered it with stones, and then I arranged the plants. Why did I arrange the plants? To see how this flower bed would function. Of course, I don't have all the plants here yet because I'll still be planting some more, but by arranging them and letting them sit for 2 or 3 days, I obviously had to water them more. But because of that, I noticed how I can move around in this flower bed, because the next step will be to lay out these flat stones, which will mark an informal path along this bed. Since I'm moving this flower bed, part of it is under the fence and I want to take some plants out from there and put them here. And there will be limited access because the bed will be about 3 meters wide, so I want to make a path in between. And this path is the first stage of my work. I'm going to lay out these flat stones and we'll see how it looks in the space. My dear friends, I've laid out the stones. And now, the rule is, of course, this isn't supposed to be the shortest path through this flower bed. It's supposed to be a way to walk through it without stepping on the plants. Marking out such a path, listen, these stones can be at different distances, both farther apart and closer together. It would be very good if they weren't laid out like with a ruler, but rather arranged in a way that forms a single path but not a regular one. Of course, you can set them in some dry concrete, but I'm laying them on the ground here because later on I'll be spreading compost here, adding some more soil and planting the plants so the soil level will rise a bit. Everything will arrange itself nicely. Because it's quite important that right now it might still be a bit loose in some places. However, once we start working, start digging up the soil and the plants begin to grow, it's going to be great. And speaking of those stones and the plants growing around them, I'd like there to be actually 2 or 3 such sequences on this path. I have thyme, which will be planted here between the stones in this first part. I'd like it to grow nicely here, so that when it blooms, it ties the stones together. Next, creeping phlox will probably create a similar effect. So these kinds of plants will be planted more or less in this central part, and that will allow me to achieve a flowing effect in this flower bed. Between these elements, where the path will wind, there will be taller plants in the corner and further away shorter ones later in the front. The flower beds will have both lower and higher parts. And thanks to that, I'll be able to walk between these plants on these stones, and there will be that wave effect. Since there was a lawn here before, I wanted to add a bit of soil and some compost to strengthen the soil right away. Of course, earlier I also added some fertilizer, like granulated manure, and now I'll mix it all together, spread it on the bed, and start planting the plants. In a few recent comments, you asked me, Hubert Lemansky, the gardens you show and what you do in the garden are great, but very often it requires a lot of financial investment. How can you do it? My rule is this: full responsibility. After all, it's not about spending all your money, but about managing those expenses very well. Thanks to Allegro Pay, I have everything under control. Everything is there in black and white. This service works like a flexible wallet. I buy when the garden and the rhythm of the garden need it, and I pay in convenient installments or in 30 days. This tool really works great because the garden is already growing, the plants are already growing, and I pay when it suits me. Deferred payments are a great service. You have 30 days to settle the payment without any additional costs. APR 0%. You buy, check the product at home, and pay only when you're sure you want to keep it. And the bonus for Allegro Smart users is that you have the option to pay in 2 installments at no extra cost. My dear friends, the plants plant themselves. I'm already 1/3 of the way through. If you want to find out what kind of plants these are here, check out the previous episode. The link is somewhere around here. There I talked about these plants for such a sunny flower bed. Write which of these plants you like more. And now just a note, the Louisiana wormwood, which is behind me. Remember that it spreads a lot, and the way to keep it from spreading is to plant it in a flower bed in a pot, a bigger pot. Then it will only spread within that pot and won't go anywhere else. Because it really can spread a lot throughout the flower bed, so be careful with it. My dear friends, the flower bed is basically ready now. I say basically because I'll probably still plant some smaller plants. But now all that's left is to rake it well, even out the spots where the soil is sticking out here and there. Then sweep off the stones. And most importantly, water it at the very beginning, because even though this is a sunny bed for dry conditions, it's worth watering these plants several times at the beginning, especially if you plant them in heat like today. I hope you like the flower bed. Write it in the comments. My dear friends, the flower bed behind me is almost ready. It just needs a little watering, and I think I'll sit and watch these plants grow. I can't wait to see the final result. I'll see you in about a month or so, and I'll show you how this flower bed has grown and how it's developing. See you in the next episode.